Hey everybody, this is Matthew. Thank you so much for checking into the YouTube channel. I'm going to make a video today that I never thought I would have to make, but it has to do with the recent controversy related to the United States military and their hiring of a digital ambassador, a Navy midshipman who is also a drag queen. Now, apparently somebody thought this would be a brilliant idea to increase recruitment for the armed forces as well as in general, and the United States Navy in particular. I don't think this is going to work. In fact, I think this is a terrible, terrible idea. Now, I get it that all of the branches of the military are struggling mightily right now to recruit people to join the armed forces, and perhaps the Navy is desperate. That I understand. There are some major social demographic changes that are taking place right now that a career in the armed forces does not look desirable, but I don't think this is the way to increase recruitment. When I was young, I remember some of those commercials for the Marines, the few, the proud, the brave, etc. And there was a guy with a sword fighting a dragon. I mean, I saw that as a kid and I'm like, that is awesome. That is such a courageous model of manhood and valor. And my dad was a Marine, so it made me very, very proud. Now, everything I've heard from Navy veterans and other veterans is that this hiring of the drag queen social media influencer is deeply, deeply embarrassing. And it does make me ask the question, why would anybody think that this is a good idea? Is this the latest Bud Light incident? And by that, what I mean is, of course, Bud Light recently hired Dylan Mulvaney, who is a transgender female, I guess that's what he would prefer to be called. And Bud Light sales absolutely crashed because there's a backlash against pushing too far on these woke social agenda issues, and Bud Light sales are down something like 26%, which is absolutely catastrophic. But see, this is more important than just a bad decision in terms of advertising or recruitment, because our very defense as a free people relies upon our strong military forces, and this communicates exactly the wrong thing about strength and virtue for our nation. Okay, so imagine you're a hacker. You're in Russia, you're in China, you're in North Korea, you're in Iran. You want to deeply embarrass the United States of America. If you could hack their social media and post something like this about your worst enemy, that would be the greatest day as a hacker, right? And yet we did this to ourselves. Now, so not only is this not going to increase recruitment, I don't think this is going to work. Not only is this deeply embarrassing to many of our veterans, but I'm afraid we might even be communicating something even worse about ourselves as a nation. Take, for instance, this section from 2 Samuel chapter 10. Let me read this to you. This is about David and the Ammonites. Now, David thought he had peace with the Ammonites. He had known the former king, but the king died and his new son Hanun takes power. David sends an embassy of peace to them, and this is what Hanun the Ammonite does to his men. It says, "So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips and sent them away. When it was told David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, 'Remain at Jericho until your beards have grown and then return.'" Okay, so what does Hanun do to humiliate the soldiers of David? Well, he shaves their beard and cuts off their pants at the buttocks. Both of those things are intentional because they make the soldiers look effeminate. The shaving of the beard is to make a man look more effeminate, right? The cutting off the pants at the buttocks is to make them look sexually available. It's deeply humiliating, and it's meant to be deeply embarrassing, and in fact it is. The men go back to David, they're deeply humiliated, and David tells them to stay close until your beards grow back and you look like a man again. So why is this a really nefarious thing for the United States Navy to do? Well, what we're suggesting is that our armed forces have been effeminized. And not only effeminized, but hypersexualized, because that's the point of a drag queen, is not only to look female, okay, which is already spoken against in the law of God in the Old Testament scriptures, because there's laws in the Old Testament about cross-dressing, but more than that, it's hypersexualized availability. Now, this is what happens in very violent contexts, like in the prison, for instance. In prisons or in war, in very violent situations, sometimes a person is beaten into submission, such as that they'll willingly take on these female attributes and pose themselves as somebody who is sexually available, so as to stave off any worse infliction of violence upon them. In other words, it's a pleading for mercy. It's a pleading for mercy. Hanun did that to David's men to make them feel deeply embarrassed and ashamed. Okay, they didn't do it to themselves willingly, but it was forcibly done to them. But sometimes in hyperviolent context, a person will make themselves look effeminate and sexually available so as to basically plead for mercy from their would-be conqueror or even their killer. It's like a last-ditch effort to plead for mercy. Now, what has me really concerned about this is that we would seem to have a naval conflict brewing with China, right? Because right now, one of the biggest areas of potential conflict is related to Taiwan. And if the United States and China come into military conflict, active open war, it's largely going to be a naval battle. And so it seems significant to me that the United States of America would willingly pose themselves as effeminate and sexually available. It does seem to be suggesting some sort of a submission to a greater power or a stronger force. I am deeply concerned that that is the message. I hope that that's not true. I hope that this is just some sort of really, really bad judgment call based on some sort of recruitment demographics that they thought would work with a younger, changing millennial and Gen Z generation. But I have a bad feeling that this is communicating far more than the powers that be hoped that it would. All right. Sorry to have to say it like that, but when we look at the scriptures, when soldiers, fighters are made to look effeminate, it is a posture of humility and shame and weakness, not a posture of strength and bravery and valor. Thanks for checking in. Love you lots. Talk to you later.